Right now, you can understand this sentence. You didn't think about how. You just did. Every other animal on Earth, no matter how big its brain, cannot do that. A dolphin can't. An elephant can't. A chimpanzee, our closest living relative, cannot. So here's a question worth asking. Why did ancient humans develop the ability to think and reason the way we do, while every other species didn't? The answer goes back 2 million years, and it's not what you'd expect. To understand it, you have to start with the brain itself. 2 million years ago, your ancestors had brains roughly the same size as a chimpanzee's, about 600 cubic centimeters. The brain you're using right now holds about 1,350. It tripled. In evolutionary terms, that is not gradual. No other organ in the history of life on Earth has grown that fast, relative to body size. Your brain uses 20% of your body's total energy, while making up just 2% of your body weight. Building and running something like that takes an enormous amount of resources. So the first question isn't how we got smarter, it's how we ever afforded to. And the strangest part isn't the size, it's the timing. The single biggest jump from 600 to roughly 900 cubic centimeters happened at one specific moment about 1.9 million years ago, when a new species appeared, Homo erectus. At that exact moment, their teeth got smaller, their gut shrank. All three changes simultaneously. Something triggered it. The answer starts with fire. The oldest evidence of humans controlling fire comes from a cave in South Africa, roughly a million years ago, and fire changed the equation in a way that had nothing to do with warmth or protection. It changed what your ancestors could do with their food. When you cook meat, something happens at a molecular level. The proteins unfold, the starches break down, the food becomes pre-digested before it ever reaches your stomach. Your gut does less work. It pulls more calories from every bite, faster, with less effort. Think about what that means practically. Your body runs on roughly 2,000 calories a day, and about 400 of those go entirely to your brain, for an organ that weighs 3 pounds. Before cooking, your ancestors couldn't reliably extract that kind of caloric density from raw food. Raw meat and raw plants require hours of digestive work to break down. Cook them first, and that work is already done. Here's the evidence. The human gut is roughly 60% smaller than it should be for a primate our size. Every other ape with a body like ours runs a much larger digestive system. We don't. And when researchers calculated the metabolic energy that freed up, the energy no longer needed to run all that extra gut tissue. It came out to almost exactly the amount needed to power a brain 3 times larger. These two organs are in direct competition for the same fuel. Every calorie powering your neurons is a calorie not spent on digestion. Cooking didn't just change what your ancestors ate, it changed what their bodies could afford to build. The brain didn't grow because your ancestors got smarter. Your ancestors got smarter because the brain finally had enough fuel to grow. But here's what makes that finding so important. Brain growth didn't happen at an even pace. It happened in bursts. And those bursts don't track improvements in diet, or the invention of better tools, or any obvious cultural advance. They track climate. During the Pleistocene, East Africa went through violent swings. Deep lakes forming and evaporating within centuries. Grasslands turning to desert and back again within a single human lifetime. Your ancestors would wake up in landscapes their parents didn't recognize. The food sources that sustained the previous generation might be gone entirely. Researchers analyzed over 100 fossilized hominid skulls and found that the biggest jumps in brain size lined up almost exactly with the most volatile climate periods. When the environment became predictable, brain growth slowed. When it became chaotic, brains grew. The implication is direct. Cognitive flexibility, the ability to read a changing environment and update your behavior faster than the environment changed, wasn't an advantage. It was the difference between eating and not eating. The ancestors who could adapt quickest were the ones who survived long enough to pass anything on. And here's where it gets strange. Because even with more fuel and more environmental pressure, that still doesn't explain what the brain actually grew to do. The obvious assumption is that bigger brains evolved for better problem solving, smarter tools, better navigation, more efficient hunting. But when researchers mapped neocortex size across every primate species, from the smallest monkeys up to the great apes, the strongest predictor wasn't any of that. It was social group size. The bigger the social group an animal needed to hold together, the bigger its neocortex. The brain didn't evolve primarily to solve environmental problems. It evolved to track other minds, to model what other individuals know, want, intend, and remember. That turns out to be one of the most demanding calculations a brain can perform. Researchers found that humans are naturally wired to manage around 150 stable relationships at once, roughly the size of a hunter-gatherer band, a military company, a functional village. And every one of those relationships involves maintaining a constantly updating social ledger. Who owes whom? Who can be trusted? Who lied last season and might lie again? The social world your ancestors navigated was as cognitively demanding as any predator they ever faced. Here's the part nobody talks about. Neanderthals had bigger brains than you. About 1,410 cubic centimeters to your 1,350. By the raw numbers, they should have had the edge. But when researchers examined Neanderthal skulls closely, they found that Neanderthals had significantly larger eye sockets than modern humans. Larger eye sockets mean a larger visual cortex, more of the brain dedicated to processing sight and movement, more brain running the body, less brain left for social processing. They lived in smaller groups, maintained less complex social networks, and the archaeological record shows they struggled to coordinate across distances the way modern humans did. 40,000 years ago, they were gone. And then there's language. The gene that gave humans speech differs from the chimpanzee version by just 2 amino acid substitutions, 2 changes in the entire genome. But those 2 changes alter how 61 genes switch on and off in the brain. And speech changed everything, because it meant your ancestors could share information about things that weren't right in front of them. A predator spotted 2 valleys over, a plant that could treat a fever, knowledge that no individual could hold alone. But here's what's fascinating. Because all of this, the brain growth, the cooking, the social complexity, the language, still doesn't fully explain the gap. Elephants have brains 3 times the size of yours. Dolphins have larger brains by weight. Crows use tools, solve complex puzzles, and recognize individual human faces. These are not simple animals. And yet the gap between them and you is not a matter of degree. It is categorical. Something else is happening. Every other animal on Earth accumulates knowledge within a single lifetime, and when it dies, most of what it learned dies with it. A crow that figures out how to open a container cannot reliably teach that technique to its offspring. The next generation starts from scratch. Knowledge resets. Every generation starts close to 0. You don't. Humans are the only species that copies, preserves, and stacks knowledge across generations indefinitely. Each generation inherits everything the one before it figured out. Every discovery, every mistake, every solved problem, and builds on top. The understanding doesn't decay. It compounds. Researchers call it the cultural ratchet. It only clicks forward. No other species has demonstrated this at any meaningful scale. Every piece of knowledge that separates your life from a crow's, language, agriculture, medicine, the ability to understand this sentence, required more accumulated understanding than any one person could have built in a lifetime, or 1,000 lifetimes. The ancient humans who came before you didn't hand you a bigger brain. They handed you 70,000 years of solved problems, each generation adding to what the last one figured out. You are not smarter than the animals. You are the only animal whose intelligence doesn't die when you do.